What's up? This is Patrick of Radicards.com, and in this podcast, I'll be covering showcase selection and brand image. So I was at the Dallas Card Show last month, January 2022, and usually when I go to these things, all the card shows I go to, really, I serpentine through the aisles and sort of make my rounds with kind of glancing at what's in the showcases, what's on the tables, what's in the bargain bins, and just going as efficiently as I can to see as much as I can at the show so I can find things in the nooks and crannies of the show. And when I walk by showcases, I don't really pay a lot of attention to what's in them because oftentimes it's stuff I'm not really interested in or couldn't afford anyway, just because I don't buy a lot of modern, and that's a lot of what's showcased. There are a lot of dealers who sell vintage, and that stuff's great too, but I'm usually in the bargain bin shopping stuff, but every now and then I pay closer attention to something if it grabs my attention in a showcase for one reason or another. So usually in showcases, it's the higher end stuff that's under lock and key, right? The stuff that requires some sort of security, some safety, but they're the stuff that brings the marquee value to the showcase. So you see a lot of Manels and Kobe's and Jordans and Griffey's and just all the classic guys, Gretzky. And then you've got all the like soccer and F1 types and all that's making a sort of a presence in the hobby. You got the Pokemon guys, some Magic cards are also making presence. But whatever's under the lock and key of the showcases is typically the best stuff, and it's expected. I expect to see high grade slabs or high grade cards in the showcases. I expect that. It's almost like I don't expect to see low end ever. I expect to see that stuff in the bargain bins. When I see low end in showcases, I have to kind of stop and think to myself, like, what on earth is this seller doing, putting an 88 Donruss Roberto Alomar in under the showcase, like in the showcase? Like, what's the point of this? The reason that kind of sparked this idea is one dealer I walked past. He had an 87 Topps Barry Bonds, an 88 Donruss Roberto Alomar, and an 89 Donruss Craig Biggio rookie card. And I walked past his showcase, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, that's odd. Those are cards I get from 10 to 50 cents to $1 all day, every day, forever. Just don't really need to pay much more for those cards because they're massively produced. So I stopped after I walked past, and I turned around, and I walked up to that dealer, and I asked him, I was like, what are you asking on that Roberto Alomar? He's like, I do 10. I was like, okay, well, what about the bonds? He's like, I do 20 on the bonds. I was like, okay, so how much for the 89 Donruss Craig Biggio rookie card? He's like, well, that's an error. So I'm asking 50 on that. And I said to him, are you going to feed me the period, no period after the ink symbol thing? Is that what you're going to feed me? He's like, yeah. I was like, you got to understand that for every one period, there's one more unperiod. These are not rare cards. They printed billions of each. You buy a brick of them, you get like half and half, like a good chunk of each. Like you don't have to worry about. I don't know why there's this period, no period propaganda that's floating around the hobby. They're not rare. Write that down. The ink period, ink no period thing is not an error. It's just there's a slight small variation. There's a lot of releases like that in the early 90s. You'll see the asterisk with a number after it, and some of them have a different number. You'll see 2 asterisks. You'll see period, no period. You'll see all kinds of different things in those variations. Heck, Topps has the glow back and no glow back. They're not rare. It's all that stuff. You buy lots of them, you're going to get some of each, like a bunch of each if you buy a big lot. So I wasn't interested in even telling him that the stuff he's got in his showcase is not worth even a fraction of his asking prices. It wasn't worth my time. I just think it's interesting when people do that. What they're really telling everybody else is they lack knowledge on the hobby. And it makes them kind of look not great. Like it's not a good reflection of an image. Like it impacts their brand image. Like they might not even know it, and it's not my job to tell them. It's not anybody's job to tell them. It's their job to figure it out for themselves. Typically I see the standard high grade. I rarely see this instance of super low grade, massively overpriced under lock and key. I saw this at the 2017 National, I think, One guy attended the National One Dealer, and his entire showcases, all of his showcases, like a bunch of them, they were all low end, and the prices were just ludicrous. It was like a 94 finest Frank Thomas. The guy went on $20 for it, a raw card, not even the refractor. like it's just a raw standard base card. And when I see that, I'm like, it's too bad that happens, but it's a signal that this person is brand new to the hobby, like just brand new, like hasn't been in it very long. Probably one of the people who came in the last 2 years over the COVID spike. There are a lot of knowledgeable people in that new entry block, but there are a lot who are still learning. And honestly, this hobby is very complex. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to learn. So I don't blame him for that. I just think that it's going to be hard to make his money back on his table fees if that's what he's peddling. That's the thing. It's like it becomes his problem. It becomes their problem. They have to figure it out. Then they will. If they're not selling anything and they just spent $200 or $300 on a table fee, they're going to be like, well, I won't come back, or I'll have to figure out how to change the scope of my offering, whatever it is I'm trying to sell. And so that's something that I discussed other things with him. He had another piece that was really interesting and fascinating, and I liked it. Of course, it wasn't something I'm interested in, but I kind of just wanted to make it a point that I wasn't just there for those cards, because I didn't want to make it too obvious that, I was trying to like point out that those cards are worth very, very little in comparison to his asking prices. And I didn't want to I don't want to offend people too. It's just like my position is that I want to inquire without seeming too obvious about what it is I'm trying to do. But nice guy, super nice guy. I talked to him for a good 5-6 minutes maybe. And we just back and forth about really memorabilia. Like I moved the discussion to memorabilia because I got the information I needed from the stuff in a showcase, and I just wanted to talk about something else. But super nice guy, and he has a lot to learn is really what it comes down to. And I hope he does. And I hope he does learn, and he comes back to the shows and gets his feet wet and figures out how best to sell product, like what to sell. Like sometimes when you're not selling product, it comes down to two main things. Your prices aren't right, or what you're selling isn't right. And sometimes it's both. Right? And so in his instance, it's kind of both, because the cards have low collectability in themselves as they are standalones, and the prices were too high. So really, he should change his scope and his prices. And so it's easy to do. He can do that. Everybody can. But that's just something that if you enter a market and you're brand new at it and you're not selling product, it might be because what you're selling is stuff people don't want, or your prices are too high. And that's, you'll figure it out real fast. If you're not moving product within a month's time, it's time to go back and revisit what it is you're selling and how you're selling the product. Just for the record, I love those cards. I'm a huge Junk Wax fan. If you've been following my blog for any amount of time, you understand that when I go to shows, a lot of good chunk of what I buy is that stuff. But I have a cap. I don't buy it at any price point. There are limits. I have very specific rules on how much I'm willing to pay for every one of those cards. I will not pay certain dollar figures for certain cards ever, and I don't care who's selling it. Like, unless it's a slabbed card, I'm talking raw. I buy a lot of raw. But if someone's charging me $5 for a Bonds rookie, I'll walk. I just don't need it. The Fleer maybe, but everything else, it's not going to happen. I'll be in for like $1 for the tops or whatever. But the guy's charging $20. I'm like, there's not even a spark of influence and thought when that information is received. I'm already on to the next thing, whatever that is. But that was one dealer. And at the whole Dallas Card Show, I think of all the dealers I saw, that was the only one who had stuff in a showcase that was the wrong scope and the wrong price. Nice guy, super nice guy, but vast majority of the dealers there know what they're doing, and they're smart and they work hard, and this guy does too, I'm sure. But you want to go to sell, you want to go to move to make money. You don't want to double think things like, should I sell this to this guy? Or one dealer asked me, he's like, hey, Patrick, I had this guy come in to buy this card. What do you think? And I was like, well, what are you here for exactly? Are you here to sell? Or or keep. And so I think that when I positioned that reply to him, it got him thinking. Unfortunately, with that transaction, I came back after walking the room again, and I came back to him. I said, "Hey, whatever happened with that deal?" He's like, "The guy never came back." I was like, "Man, it's just so what you just did is you indicated to the market that you're holding is more important than selling, and that's fine. But if you're here to sell, take advantage of offers when they come by and try to counter and figure out a negotiation that works. Maybe not send the prospect on their way to come back later because they might not come back." I've done that. Like, "Hey, come back tomorrow," and then I forget, or like I'm on to something else. Like that's happened. But I'm a little bit more persistent in my strategy. Like if I see something that I like, I'll make it a point to go back and see if I can close a deal on it. Like typically when that happens, it's usually because my first interaction with the table is that the person behind the counter isn't the negotiating authority. They're like the assistant or the person there just to have the second person to man the table with. So I'll swing back, the day after or a couple hours later when I'm doing my rounds and see if I can work something out. And the negotiation thing is that if we can't reach a deal, that's okay. Like it's nothing against them or us. Like it's just couldn't agree on a price. There's no problem. I've met some great people at these shows. Most interactions have been really great. And one gentleman, he and I have worked on deals together, and we've passed on deals. And I always make it a point to go back and say hi and see what he's got. And I typically buy something from him. Super nice guys. And that has been a really great experience for me to build my network and to get to know other dealers and I'm not a dealer yet, but I may be in the future. I want to set up at one of these shows and start moving some of my inventory, not my cards, but my supplies line. So we'll see what happens there. But I just want to touch on this aspect of what you present to the market and how you price your products will reflect on your brand image. And it could reflect on your brand identity if you start to internalize that maybe I'm doing something wrong. I'm not selling this stuff. What's going on? And then you maybe, ask people, hey, what am I doing wrong? I'm not selling anything. And somebody, if you're lucky, you'll get an honest response. And if you're really lucky, you'll take the honest response and not get defensive about it. And so this is just kind of an interesting way that to understand in business, your presentation of product can influence how people perceive your knowledge authority on the category, whatever that is. So in this case, it's sports cards, trading cards. Like the Bonds and the Alomar and the Bijou, I mean, they're so available. There's no reason why you should pay $20 for raw. I mean, I think we're many, many decades out from seeing those price points for those cards. Could be like a century out. Like seriously, there's so many of them in the market that it's going to be a while before I think anybody's going to pay $10 for a raw 88 Donruss Roberto Alomar. I have $50 asking price for the 89 Bijou in any version is not going to happen for many years to come, and especially that ink no dot nonsense. It is just nonsense. Anybody who's paying premiums for that does not know that stuff was printed into gajillions. Heck, they're still printing it now. The printing presses are still producing 89 Donruss today, right now. Is the joke, right? It's like, yeah, they're still printing 88 Donruss right now, still going, still happening. They've never stopped printing it. So when I go to shows, I see bricks of everything. It's constant. I used to joke that I have some really like super knowledgeable friends in the hobby. Like they've been around since before I was born, and they've been in the hobby doing, cards since I wasn't even around yet. I told a friend of mine, I was like, I want to make it my life's goal to get every single copy in print ever of the 88 Topps Greg Maddux. Like my life's goal to get every copy that has ever been printed of that card. Of course, I won't do that. But one of these Dallas card shows, I came back with something like 30 copies of that card. And so I joked about it that I'm going to drop every project in my life and just focus on that one card. It's just such a funny thing to think about. What a horrible use of time and money. one of my favorite pictures. Certainly great, but just like the content that all that time and money could be spent on other things that could, improve your life or whatever. It's just I'm spending it all on 88 Topps Greg Maddux, not even a rookie card. So anyway, to touch on that, the showcase selection and brand image piece I think is an important one to touch on because your actions reflect your presentation, your perceived image. When people perceive you, it can be influenced by what you produce and deliver to the market. You can stretch this out into other aspects of life, like how you interact with people, how you dress, how you talk, how you deliver dialogue to people, the quality of your vocabulary, the quality of your brevity, the quality of your emails. Like, what do you say in email and how do you present yourself? Do you drab on and on for like paragraphs to say one small bullet point? Or do you just say like, this is it, done, and to save the reader time? So this is, I think, not just in trading cards, but in kind of life alone, that less is more, like don't waste time saying 12 words when 6 will do. Don't use run-on sentences. Drop paragraphs after 5 sentences, or, just try to consolidate delivery of content somehow. And if it necessitates a longer duration of some capacity, then fine, like produce that result. But oftentimes it doesn't. Typically you can get things done faster. You can process things more efficiently by just simplifying things. Just simplify things. Like I'm not selling. Okay, let's change what I'm selling, or let's change the prices. Let's change, like, maybe I'm not selling in the right category. Maybe I need to learn what I do well, whatever that is. I always, I've given a lot of talks in my day, and one of the things I talk about is the value of hobbies. When you learn something about something and you're curious about it and you love it and you find your passion, you will find opportunities in that category, whatever that is. And if you love something so much, you'll naturally learn about it and you'll be good at whatever that is in that category, whatever you end up doing. If you're a writer or a seller or a designer or whatever it is that you do, you should have a higher probability to find success in whatever that is, right? So the hobby thing is just such an important piece. Another thing too, is I talk about, is that we were all born with very specific talents. Some of us were naturally good at whatever that is. Like our parents put us through a lot of structure growing up, like all the different sports practice, the pep rallies for swimming or archery or whatever it is. That's to figure out what we do well naturally. In college, it's the same thing. We're required to take all these core classes that most of us don't want to take, but it's because they're trying to help us figure out what we want to do, what we want to major in, how we want to make money in after college. The other benefit to the core classes are that it helps you have common dialogue with people to create conversation that's not just about the latest news feeds. It's deeper, richer knowledge that you get to take with you. Helps you learn how to think. So there are tertiary benefits to the core classes, but in hobbies, you'll eventually find what you do well. You'll eventually find your place. If you tinker with it enough, you'll eventually find that, whatever it is. And in selling, you'll naturally meander around to find what works and what doesn't, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to observe. So the guy not selling the junk wax singles for massive overpriced premiums, it behooves him to wise up and be like, well, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? And then figuring that out and then adjusting accordingly so that he can make money, so that he can support his family or whatever it is he does. So I'll end there. Just, something to think about. If you're presented with an opportunity to set up at a show, know what you're selling. Know what is hobby fluff. The ink no dot is fluff. It's very, if you want to sell it, maybe put it online to see if you can capture that audience. But when it comes down to, you got to remember, if you go to the show, you're going to be surrounded by a ton of professionals who are in this, they've been doing this a while, and people who are hobby experts walking around asking questions. And so the dealer showcase at the show might not be the best place to present this content. Maybe put it online if you feel like you can ride that wave of people buying the ink, no ink stuff for hundreds of dollars. It's just absurd. And sometimes I think about putting up some of my stuff just to make a little extra money, but I don't know. I'd have to do comp research and see if that trend is still happening. So funny. Anyway, I'm going to end there. Thank you for tuning into the Radicards podcast and radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Reno, and until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.